My sister laughed when I said I was moving out. "You'll be back in a week, broke," she said. I just smiled. 3 months later, she showed up crying outside my new house. I didn't pack my bags out of rage. I didn't slam the door on the way out. I didn't scream or throw accusations across the kitchen table like my sister used to when things didn't go her way. I just stood there, quietly folding my last hoodie into a suitcase that had waited too long to be zipped. Behind me, Lindsay, my older sister by 3 years and 10 miles of arrogance, leaned in the doorway with that smirk that had haunted most of my adult life. "You'll be back in a week," she said, popping a grape into her mouth. Broke. Exhausted. Realizing this world eats guys like you for breakfast. She was always good at the dramatic pause, like a sitcom villain waiting for the laugh track. I didn't give her one. Instead, I smiled. Not because I had a secret fortune or a safety net. I didn't. I had $78 in my checking account, a beat-up sedan with bald tires, and no job lined up after quitting my night shift at the gas station. But I also had something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. "Good luck," I said, hoisting the suitcase by its cracked handle. She chuckled and shook her head, muttering something like, "delusional," under her breath as I walked past her and out the front door of our parents' house. My house too, technically, but it never felt like mine. The sun was already dipping below the trees when I pulled out of the driveway, the place where I'd lived for 26 years, stuck between college flunks, dead-end jobs, and the guilt-trap expectations of a family that never thought I'd amount to anything more than spare labor. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel scared. What I felt was clean. Untethered. Like someone had finally loosened the chain around my ribs. I didn't have a destination that night, just a cheap room I'd prepaid for a week at a rundown motel across town. But for the first time in my life, I slept in a place where I didn't have to justify my silence, or dodge jabs wrapped in family banter, or feel like a constant disappointment. And that was the beginning. I woke up the next morning to the sound of water leaking from the bathroom faucet. The motel room smelled like stale smoke and citrus cleaner, and the walls were so thin I could hear the guy next door clearing his throat like he was auditioning for a lung disease. But I was alone. And free. And that counted for something. I sat on the edge of the stiff mattress and stared at the cracked ceiling for a while, trying to talk myself out of the pit that was already forming in my chest. A motel wasn't a home. I didn't have a job. I had enough food in my backpack for 2 days, if you considered 5 packets of ramen and a can of beans. Food. But I wasn't going back. Not after years of being the family's convenient punchline. The artsy type, who couldn't hold a job. The daydreamer, who wasn't built for the real world. Lindsay especially liked to twist the knife. She had this talent for making her insults sound like advice. "You know, maybe you'd feel more confident if you actually did something with your life." Or, "Not everyone's cut out for independence. And that's okay. Some people are just meant to stay close to home." I used to laugh those off. Pretend I didn't care. But it chipped at you. Day after day. Year after year. Eventually you either broke, or hardened. So I got to work. I found a nearby coffee shop with free Wi-Fi and lived there between job boards and freelance gig sites. I skipped lunch most days and made instant noodles in the motel microwave for dinner. I sold my old video game console for gas money and downloaded every free course I could find on copywriting, basic coding, virtual assistants, anything. I wasn't picky. I sent out over 100 resumes in the first 2 weeks. Anything I was slightly qualified for, I applied. Anything I wasn't, I learned until I could fake it. Then, finally, something hit. A remote gig doing customer support for a small e-commerce business. Not glamorous, but it was income. I kept my expenses low, moved into a shared apartment with 2 roommates who mostly kept to themselves. No luxuries. No takeout. Just hustle and more hustle. I reminded myself every day, this isn't forever. It's the bridge. The tunnel. The middle of the story no one claps for. At night, I'd sit by the window and look at rental listings. Small homes. Quiet neighborhoods. Nothing flashy. Just a place that was mine. And during those nights, when exhaustion would whisper, maybe Lindsay was right, I'd think about her laugh that day on the porch. That grape in her hand? The way she said broke, like it was a character flaw. I wasn't going to prove her wrong just to get even. I was going to prove her wrong because I knew I could. The email came on a rainy Thursday. Subject line, Lisa approved, welcome home. I must have read it 5 times before I let myself believe it. The little house was nothing fancy, single story, 2 bedrooms, a porch just wide enough for a folding chair and a cup of coffee. But the moment I saw the listing, something about it just clicked. It looked like peace. It looked like mine. I scraped together the down payment using my first 2 paychecks, some freelance side money, and a small loan from a coworker turned friend who believed in me more than I was used to. The landlord liked that I had consistent income and didn't mind that I didn't have a long credit history. You seem hungry, he said. Hungry people pay rent. I moved in with nothing but a mattress, a thrift store table, and a folding chair I found on the curb. No TV. No couch. Just space. Quiet. Air that didn't carry judgment in it. The first morning in that house, I sat cross-legged on the floor with a cup of gas station coffee, staring out the front window. It was cloudy, the street was still damp from the night's rain, and the only sound was the ticking of my $4 kitchen clock. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Stillness. Not emptiness. There's a difference. Stillness. There's a strange kind of power in having nothing and realizing you're okay. Not settling okay, but capable okay. Like I could build from this. I could breathe here. I didn't need the noise of my family or their low expectations to define what I could be. 3 weeks after I moved in, I got promoted to team lead at my remote job. Small pay bump, a few extra hours, and more responsibility. It was modest, but it felt like the universe saying, keep going. Then came the call. It was a Saturday. I was in the middle of assembling a second-hand bookshelf when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something, maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, made me swipe. Hello? There was a pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in months. Hey. It was Lindsay. Her voice cracked on that one word. And I knew. Something had happened. She never called unless it was to gloat or make a point. But this wasn't the same Lindsay who called me broke and delusional 3 months ago. This voice was smaller. Shaky. Can I come over? She said. Please? I hesitated. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because I needed a minute to process what was happening. This wasn't a prank. She was crying. She sounded like someone who didn't have anywhere else to go. And for the first time in our lives, the balance had shifted. She was on my doorstep now. I heard the knock before I saw her. It was soft, almost hesitant. The kind of knock you give when you're not sure you'll be welcome. I stood behind the door for a second, hand on the knob, pulse steady. Then I opened it. And there she was. Lindsay. Standing on my porch in the same oversized hoodie she used to steal from my closet in high school. Her makeup was smeared, eyes puffy, hair pulled into a messy bun that didn't hide the panic underneath. She looked smaller somehow. Or maybe it was that I was standing taller. Hey, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Behind her, in the driveway, I saw her car. Trunk popped. A duffel bag and a small suitcase inside. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She started talking. I didn't know where else to go. She sniffled and looked down at her hands. Evan kicked me out. Actually threw my stuff into the hallway. He changed the locks. I tried going to Mom and Dad's, but she let out a weak laugh. They're in Arizona now. Some retirement resort. They don't even have room for me. I raised an eyebrow. What about your friends? She looked up, and that's when I saw it, something I never thought I'd see in her eyes. Shame. They're not really friends, she said. Not the kind that you can show up crying to. Most of them didn't even answer. For a moment, we just stood there. Her on the porch, me in the doorway of the house she once swore I'd never last in. I just need a place to stay, she said finally. Just for a little while. I'll get back on my feet, I swear. I leaned against the frame, arms crossed. Funny. That's what you said to me, remember? Her lips parted, but no words came. I let the silence stretch. I remember when I told you I was moving out, I said, keeping my voice calm. You laughed. You said I'd be back in a week. Broke. Crawling. She nodded slowly. I know. I was a jerk. I was worse than that. And I'm sorry. That caught me off guard. Lindsay never apologized. Not really. Not in a way that felt real. But this one did. Because it wasn't just an apology, it was a surrender. I stepped aside and opened the door. You can come in, I said. But we're going to set some terms. Her eyes flicked up. Terms? If you stay here, you contribute. Chores. Rent. Boundaries. No chaos. No guilt tripping. You pull your weight or you leave. I've worked hard to build this peace. I'm not letting anyone take it from me. She nodded quickly. Okay. Yeah. Anything. I watched her step inside hesitantly, like someone crossing a border into a life they didn't think they'd ever need to live. She looked around the room, plain, clean, quiet. Her eyes lingered on the little bookshelf I'd built, the dishes drying neatly on the rack, the absence of clutter. It's nice, she said. It's mine, I replied. And just like that, the mighty had fallen, not with a crash, but with a quiet knock and tear-streaked cheeks. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. But inside I felt it. Balance. Finally. The first morning, she asked where the coffee was. I pointed to the empty cabinet. You want coffee, you buy coffee. She blinked, like she hadn't processed the idea yet. Then she nodded and grabbed her keys. That's how it began. A slow, quiet unraveling of everything Lindsay used to be. She folded laundry without being asked. Scrubbed the bathroom. Took out the trash. Once, I caught her reading job postings on her phone while washing dishes. Her phone, by the way, plugged into the same outlet I paid the electric bill for. The first week, she didn't complain. The second, she asked if she could pay rent and grocery runs until her first paycheck. I agreed. She came home with actual food. Vegetables. Real bread. Not the frozen kind. One night she looked at me across the table and said, "You're different now." I just kept eating. What I wanted to say was, no. I'm finally me. The version you never let exist. I came home from a late shift and found a plain white envelope sitting on the kitchen counter. My name was written on the front in her handwriting, neat, lowercase, like she used to write on birthday cards when we were kids. Inside was $180 in cash. No note. No explanation. But I knew what it was. Her first rent payment. No ceremony. No excuses. Just quiet accountability. I stood there for a long time, holding that envelope, remembering all the times she mocked me for not having my life together. And now here we were. The same house. Different sides of the story. It was nearly midnight when I found her on the back porch. She was curled up in the old camping chair I'd dragged out there a week earlier, the one with the wobbly leg and faded fabric. A half-empty mug of tea sat on the railing beside her, and her phone was face down on her lap. I almost didn't go out. I thought about giving her space. But something about the way her shoulders were slumped forward made me open the door and step outside. She didn't look up right away. "I didn't think you'd still be awake," I said. "Couldn't sleep," she murmured. "The quiet's loud." I nodded and sat down across from her. The night air was cool. Crickets hummed somewhere in the grass, and a neighbor's porch light flickered faintly through the trees. Then she said it, softly, like it hurt to let the words out. "I really messed up." I didn't say anything. Just let her speak. I thought I had everything figured out. Evan had a good job, I had mine, we had plans. But then he got laid off. Started drinking. Got paranoid. Angry. Her fingers gripped the mug a little tighter. He hated when I stayed late at work. Thought I was cheating. Started checking my phone. My emails. One night he threw my laptop across the room during an argument. I left, but I came back. I always came back. She finally looked at me then. You ever love someone so much you start believing the worst parts are just phases? I held her gaze. Yeah, I said quietly. I've loved people who made me feel small, too. She blinked like she didn't expect me to understand. Then her lip trembled, and she looked away. I lost my job a month after I left him, she continued. They said it was downsizing, but I knew it was because I'd been distracted. Missing work. Making mistakes. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I burned every bridge I had. Thought I didn't need anyone. Even you. I didn't say I told you so. Didn't remind her of the years she spent stepping on my confidence like it was her personal trampoline. Instead, I said, You still got one bridge left. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I used to be so smug, she said. Watching you struggle. Thinking you'd never leave. Never make it. You weren't wrong, I said. For a long time, I didn't believe I could either. We sat in silence for a while after that. Two people who had grown up in the same house but never really lived in the same world. I'm going to make this right, she said eventually. I don't want to be that person anymore. I believe you, I said. And I did. Not because of some tear-filled apology, or because she finally admitted I was right, but because that night, on that porch, she stopped performing. She wasn't Lindsay the golden child. Or the mean sister. Or the girl who always had the last word. She was just someone who had fallen. And was trying to climb back up. She came through the front door like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Dropped her bag on the floor, kicked off her shoes mid-step, and stood in the middle of the living room grinning like someone who'd just won a game she wasn't supposed to be playing. I got it, she said. I raised an eyebrow from the kitchen. Got what? The job. She said it like it was still sinking in for her. Like saying it out loud made it real. I turned off the burner and leaned against the counter. Wait, the office admin one? The place you said probably wouldn't even call you back? She nodded, breathless. Yeah. That one. Interview was last week. I thought I bombed it. But they just called me. Said I start Monday. Full-time. Decent pay. Benefits. I smiled. That's huge, Linz. Her eyes glossed over for a second. She didn't cry. She'd already done enough of that in the first few weeks. But her voice cracked a little. I haven't had anything go right in so long, I forgot what it felt like. She sat down on the edge of the couch like her knees had given out. Hands in her lap, still shaking from whatever adrenaline rush she was riding. I didn't think I'd come back from all this, she said. I thought I'd just coast through life pretending I had it together. Making fun of everyone else so no one would look too close at me. That used to work for you, I said, not unkindly. She let out a slow breath. Yeah. Until it didn't. I walked over and handed her the cup of coffee I just made for myself. She took it without hesitation, like we were back in high school and I was the only one who could make it right when her world cracked open. But this time, she was the one fixing things. And I was just watching her grow into someone I wasn't sure she could be. She looked up at me, that same smile still clinging to her face. You know, she said, I didn't think you'd let me stay. I wouldn't have blamed you. I didn't let you stay, I said. I gave you a shot. You're the one who stayed. That silence came back, the good kind. The kind where everything feels understood even if nothing else is said. That night she made dinner for the first time. Not microwave meals or takeout. Real food. It was burned on one side and underseasoned, but we ate every bite. Because it tasted like something we hadn't had in years. Progress. I found it by accident. It was a Sunday morning, laundry day, and Lindsay had left one of her sweaters in the dryer. When I picked it up to fold it, A piece of folded notebook paper slid out of the sleeve and hit the floor. I shouldn't have read it. I know that. But her name wasn't on it. Neither was mine. Just a plain sheet with uneven handwriting that looked rushed and raw. Like the words had to come out before they dissolved in her throat. So I read it. It wasn't long. Just a few paragraphs. A letter clearly, but never sent. To the brother I mocked, dismissed, and quietly envied. You were the one we underestimated. The quiet one. The one who never made a scene, never needed a spotlight. I used to think that meant you were weak. Now I know it meant you were strong in ways I didn't understand. You did what none of us thought you could. You built a life with your bare hands and stubborn hope. And you let me walk into it, broken and broke, and never once made me feel smaller than I already did. I wish I had been better to you. I wish I had seen you, really seen you, for what you were, the anchor in a family full of storms. I'm working on changing. I know that doesn't fix the past, but maybe it makes the future less heavy. I hope one day I can repay the debt, not with money, but with growth. Thank you for opening the door. Thank you for not closing it in my face. I never said it before, but here it is now. I'm proud of you. I stood there in the laundry room, the dryer still humming behind me, the letter in my hands. She never meant for me to see it. Maybe she was too afraid to say it. Or maybe she didn't think I needed to hear it. But I did. Not because I needed validation. But because somewhere along the way, we stopped being rivals. And started being siblings. The funny thing about quiet victories is that they don't come with applause. No dramatic music. No slow-motion montage. Just mornings like this one. A Sunday, late August. Sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor. The smell of eggs frying. A breeze nudging the blinds. Somewhere down the hall, Lindsay was humming to herself. Off-key but happy. I was sitting at the kitchen table, same chair I used to study on back when I was teaching myself how to code, how to write copy, how to build a life from scratch. The surface was still scarred with scratches from when we moved it in. I never sanded them down. They reminded me of how far I'd come. 3 months. That's all it had taken to shift the balance. To move from the guy being laughed at in his own home, to the man who set the rules in his. Not out of revenge. Not to gloat. But because dignity had to be earned, by both of us. Lindsay had started saving for her own place. She had routines now. Woke up early. Cooked dinner twice a week. Paid rent on time. The sharp edge she once carried had dulled into something quieter, something resembling humility. Or maybe gratitude. One night, not long ago, she passed me in the hall and paused. "You're not who I thought you'd be," she said. I just smiled. "Neither are you." And that was enough. I used to dream of proving everyone wrong. Showing them all I wasn't a failure, a leech, a lost cause. But somewhere along the way, the dream changed. It stopped being about them. It became about me. The kind of man I could be when no one was watching. The kind of peace you build not from spite, but from sweat. The kind of home that doesn't need to be big or flashy, because it's full of something better. Respect. If anyone's listening to this, here's what I tell you. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't need to win every argument, or make anyone feel small to feel tall. Just keep building, quietly, stubbornly. The people who once laughed at you. They'll show up eventually. And when they do, let them in, if you want to. But make sure they wipe their feet first.